live now. Let me take a look here. Dad, how are you doing down in Gulf Shores this morning?
Everything is peachy.
That's good. That's good. Thank you guys for joining us. Our special guest is Joel Nomberg this morning. Thank you, Dad, for giving us a few minutes of your time.
You're welcome.
David has been unexpectedly called to court, but in David's honor, we've got him looking over my shoulder. I don't know if you guys can see him or not, but that's usually where he is anyway, metaphorically. Dad, I want to take a little bit of time today and talk about a few things that maybe folks don't know about you, about the law, your practice, and things that you have done. And so I want to back up before we get to those things. Tell us, I know that in the past, our family has been in the garment industry, in the clothing industry, in shoes, but that's not what you did professionally. What, as a child, inspired you to want to go into the law?
My uncle in New York, Philip Acker, was an attorney. That was kind of the curious part of the beginning. And then I went through high school, of course, and went to college, and the advisor told me archaeology wouldn't put much food on the table. And I got to know some of the attorneys in Dothan, and then the whole idea of the law just interests me because I've always enjoyed civics and history, and it was a good blend to know some of the attorneys.
Oh, sorry, hold on just a second. Okay, sorry about that. And so Uncle Phil was an influence on you early on. I know that Cousin George was an attorney down in South Florida, but I don't know of any other lawyers in the family other than those two men that were older than you. Were there any others that I'm not aware of?
No, not by a relationship, a family, but it was friends. Mother and dad knew lawyers, and that was basically it, background.
And growing up, you held many jobs, including in working. Tell us what type of jobs that you had as a child and as a teenager.
Well, I guess you could say I was one of the original gophers. I went from one store to the other bringing merchandise. I sold peanuts when Dad would take me to his softball games. Enjoyed the money, so I was a hustler and a gopher.
Now, the family moved from the Bronx in the early 40s. You were about 6 or 7. Up shop ultimately in Dothan. Is that right?
Began schooling in Dothan, first grade.
And you ultimately, in high school, if I remember correctly, you were in the ROTC program?
No, Bernard, there was never any ROTC in high school, but as part of going to the University of Alabama, you were committed to 2 years of doing ROTC as a land grant college. And that $30 a month was big money.
And at what point in time did you decide that the law was going to be your professional career? How old were you?
Well, it's when I was in college, and I got the message from my advisor that said, if you want to have an income, you got to look to a profession. And the law just looked very interesting, and Alabama had a great law school. And a lot of my friends and seniors in the fraternity were going to law school. And as a matter of fact, 1 or 2 actually lived in the fraternity house and went to law school.
And you did ROTC not only as an undergraduate, but then you ended up going overseas and serving in the Vietnam War for a period of time. And that was after you had already gotten your law license.
Well, kind of let me schedule it to you. You have to do the 2 years basic, and that was in the early 60s. Then I went to the advanced ROTC, of course. And from that, you have to go through physical and summer camp. And when I got my undergraduate degree, I also the next day in a military uniform was sworn in as a United States lieutenant in the Army. And then I had a 2-year obligation to do in the Army, and they said they didn't need me at that time. I went to law school, graduated law school, passed the bar, and 50 years ago this month, I was ordered to Vietnam.
And instead of going down the road of us talking about that part of your experience, I want you to tell us a little bit about the parallels or the preparation of during your military career. How did that prepare you for your law career?
When I first went in the military, I was assigned in Baltimore, Maryland to Fort Holabird, and the colonel there assigned me as the S4, which is a supply officer, but he looked at my DD-214 and saw I was an attorney, and he parceled me out to the JAG branch, which is the legal branch, there on post, and I did a lot of legal work there, advising young folks about wills and estates and things that would help them prepare to go to Vietnam, because at that time, that was the big buildup. So when I got emergency requirement to Vietnam, I got to Saigon, Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, and went into the building there where the officers were assigned duties. And the colonel said to me, he says, "You've got your law degree?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Would you like to go to the 9th Infantry Division as the claims officer?" Well, that just didn't appeal to me because I was in uniform. I wanted to serve my country. And I asked him if there were any other options. He says, "You can go to the 9th S&T Battalion, become the personnel officer, the S1, which is a staff job. And you'll also probably be working on the boats, which were the Riverines." So I elected to go down to the 9th Infantry Division. And for the time I was in Vietnam, I served as the S1, and I served as a company commander of a boat company on the river, Mekong River.
Now, all of your military career preceded you going into private practice. Were there any parts of your training in military that you then carried over into your law career?
Well, it's kind of funny how things worked out. I came back to Dothan, and of course, Fort Rucker's there, and it got around that I'd been in the service, I'd been to Vietnam, I'd done legal work, and I had a lot of clients from Fort Rucker, and the work I did in Vietnam was a lot of advising even officers, young E1 enlisted people, E1 to E5, and I just had a amazing clientele even in Vietnam, advising young people or even some of the officers, as I said. And when I got to Dothan, it just made it very, very interesting, and it just flowed smoothly. I knew how to deal with military people.
And last summer, we were at the Alabama State Bar annual conference where you and several others were honored with your 50 years of service being members of the Alabama State Bar. And during that 45 to 46 or so years you were in active practice, what type of work did you concentrate on?
It was, in the beginning, of course, you got a lot of trial practice doing criminal work, but I elected to go the civil route, and I was part of the Alabama Trial Lawyers Association. I got to meet some great trial lawyers, some good friends, which I hold today, and all that held me in good stead with meeting people and being able to serve clients.
And what type of casework did you do?
Pretty much what you young fellows are doing now, a lot of workers' compensation, a lot of accident cases, a lot of work with the Department of Human Resources, developing files that help people get child support and custody. And I did their appellate work out of Houston County to the Court of Appeals.
For those of you just joining us, thank you for tuning in. Hey, Rick up in Virginia. Hey, Aunt Susan, good to see you both. We're talking with the patriarch of the Nomberg Law Firm, Joel Nomberg. Dad is happily retired down on the Alabama Panhandle, and we're lucky to have a few minutes with him today. We're talking about his legal career in the Deep South in Alabama. And if you have any questions or comments you want to make, just throw them into the comments section, and I'll be glad to field them and throw them to Dad for some comments here or there. Dad, talk to us a little bit about what was it like? I know at different times you were a solo practitioner. Other times you were part of a larger firm. You had partners, you had associates. And that has kind of over the years, at least from what I recall, different times of the year, different years, you had different attorneys working with you. Talk to us a little bit about those experiences.
Well, I was brought to the peanut center of the world by Bill Baxley, a very dear friend, and he introduced me to Bill Stokes, and Bill offered me a partnership. And I've had great partners all through the years, just some good people who still retain some of the friendships. And I'm able to work with people. I've just learned a long time ago that you can resolve issues talking it out rather than getting mad and just becoming a shell. And I can honestly say that in all the years of practice, I only had to fire one person that worked for me. And I never considered them as employees. I always talked to them as co-workers, and I always kept a good relationship. And I was proud of the practice. We did a lot of good things. We had a lot of good cases. And I can't think of many bad moments, or very few, if any, that I had practicing law. And it's been a joy. The only thing that was missing, there was a large time or a gap there where I was not involved in doing anything with the military on a day-to-day basis or a week basis. And when I moved to Gulf Shores, that opened up a great door. And this past 3 years working with the Veterans Court has just been a joy and a comfort in knowing I'm serving my country and my fellow man again.
Talk to us a little bit more about the Veterans Court. From my knowledge, it's in type of a program, but tell us a little bit about it. Tell us your involvement. Who do you help serve? What do you do there?
It's an interesting part of the law now, and Judge Thomason, who is a district judge in Baldwin County, serves as a circuit judge with the Veterans Court. Somehow in that first month that she was organizing, she got my name from a beloved friend who just passed away about 2 months ago, Mr. Jimmy Driver, a Marine. And I couldn't have had a better friend in many respects. He was just a good person. He introduced me to the judge. He asked me to come on board and serve as the coordinator for all of the mentors. Well, the mentors are advisors. I did not act as a lawyer. I acted as a mentor to them, advising them of how to get through their problems. We only took in cases that dealt with criminal matters. We're not talking about murders and rapes, but we're talking about other types of felonies or misdemeanors. And these are fellows that came out of Vietnam, they came out of Desert Storm, and it's any problem they had legally, we asked the sheriff's office to turn their names over to us. We brought them into the program. I screened them. We made sure of their records. We got their DD 214, and we were even to help some people who had dishonorable discharges. We got some of that waived, but the whole idea of the program is remembering this. In Vietnam, it was a draft war. In the most recent combat, those are volunteers. If you volunteer, you're given a physical examination and you're accepted. That's very important because the Army accepts you as a whole person who has no medical problems. When these young boys came out of the last three wars that we've had, the PTSD was just almost to the man. And we knew that they were healthy going in, so the Army caused their problem. And we looked to the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, and those people to help us solve their problems. And solving their problem was to put them in our program if they abide by the judge's rules, and it's an extensive course for at least a year. And if they do what they're supposed to, their record can be expunged. Why? Because they came into the service healthy, and we wanted to put them back into society healthy. I went to a special course for about 3 or 4 days in California when I first began to be the coordinator. I was out in California, so I was school trained to do my job. And we have about 15 mentors working with, I think we've worked with over 300 people in the military up to date. Now, I did resign my job After 3 years, I thought it was time for a change of command and let some new blood come in. So I'm not officially part of the mentoring system now, but they do call me, and I'm gladly help in any way I can. And it's been good for me.
Very good. Well, if there are people who are watching this either now live or later on happen to tune in and they live in the Baldwin County, Mobile area, Pensacola, down on the Panhandle, and want to be trained to be a mentor, or if they're qualified to be a mentee, who do you have any contact information that we can share and I can put in the comments section?
I don't have it in front of me, but all they have to do is contact Judge Thomason's, Michelle Thomason's office there in the Baldwin, well, it would be the Foley office in Baldwin County.
Okay. And I'll look that up and I'll post it in the comment section when we're finished here. And after, let's step back for just a few minutes. We were talking about your career in Dothan, which spanned 45, 46 years, and then you moved to Gulf Shores after that and got involved in the Veterans Court. And I know you still have friends that deal with the Veterans Court either as mentors or probably friends you've developed friendships who've been mentees. And I know those have got to be good memories for you right now and good friendships. And that leads me to this question is I want to talk about some of your most fondest memories as being a lawyer, a member of the Alabama State Bar over the last 50 years. Certainly, it's got to be too many for us to talk about here today, but there's got to be a few cases that you recall, a few lawyers you worked with, and we'd like to hear about those.
You can write 3 books with all the funny incidents and the serious ones in practicing law. As you well know, you've had a long career even right now, and you've got your stories. But a couple of more interesting things that happened is that back then, lawyers worked on Saturdays. And I happened to be sitting in my office on a Saturday, and a sergeant who I knew from the Ozark area came in. Make a long story short, it became the Pinto case. Children were riding in a Pinto, hit from behind 35 miles an hour, exploded, and 70 to 80% of their bodies were burned. And I knew that case was bigger than Dale County or Houston County, and it needed to go to the big city. And I went to Birmingham Associated the firm, and we tried that case. And that case resulted in the first $1 million verdict in Alabama history. And that was back in about 74, I think. That was huge. Ford did not want to tell the truth all during the case. They wound up with 3 different sets of lawyers, and that was a book by itself. But to see some of these great trial lawyers from the Alabama Trial Lawyers Association work their magic, you learn a lot just sitting and learning. And that was one proud moment. I still were friends with his family up to a number of years ago. They were good people. And then got involved in probably one of the biggest class actions in the Southeast. It was 27 women who were denied promotions and just were kept thumbs down on them. These women had master's degrees. They had a lot of education. They couldn't get promotions. And to make that, again, a very long story that went on. It wasn't a case. It was a career. And Ed Harden was a master. But we won 26 out of the 27 cases that we filed in the Middle District. And the reason we didn't win the 27th one, the judge had to do something. I guess he said, well, she was never employed, so I'm not going to put her in the class. But we won all of those, and we were honored, as well as the women were, for the work in this case. It promoted women's interests and their promotions and things like that at Fort Rucker, which most of them were like low-ranking clerks and typists. And these women were well educated, and we fought the good fight.
Well, I know those are 2 excellent memories where you've done some very fine lawyering, as you will. Would you have ever have thought that with the evolution of all this technology, that one day you and I would be sitting about 300 miles apart talking by way of social media on Facebook to the world?
As I jokingly told you years ago, I'm a student of the Demura, and I haven't advanced much past typewriters. I'm having to learn all of this through you, and it's over my head, and I admit it, and so do my contemporaries.
Well, it's like any good head coach. You got to have a lot of good assistants around you who know what they're doing. I don't always know what I'm doing, but I got folks so I know who do know what they're doing. So I know that you had a little help getting online today, just like I had to learn a few months ago to do this. I want to thank you guys who've tuned in with us so far. We're talking with the patriarch of the Nomberg Law Firm, Joel Nomberg. He is happily retired on the Gulf Coast, and we sure appreciate all of his counsel from time to time. He has to sometimes step in when David and I have some disagreements. You can see David's presence, if you will, over my shoulder. He got called into court today, but frankly, this was probably a little smoother conversation without him here. Don't let him know that, though. If you guys have any comments or questions while you're watching or even later on, please just throw them into the comments section. As we talked about a few minutes ago, we're going to put the Veterans Court of Baldwin County contact information in there. Thank you to Boris and to Carla, Rebecca Melba, everybody who's been watching us for a little while. Dad, I guess I want to conclude by letting you just talk us out for just a minute about some of your, I know you keep up with what's going on in the news, and I don't want to get too deep into politics. I know there's a new Supreme Court justice was just nominated, but I want to get your take from how you see it as a retiree. You're not actively practicing law, but you certainly keep up with things. What have you seen in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years in changes, not just in Alabama's work comp laws, but the law as a whole?
Everything has changed. There's very little that you can look at and haven't seen a change, but the most interesting change is this advertising. If you put too large of a sign, when I started practicing, if you put a huge or a bigger sign out in the front, the bar was calling you the next day. And these were serious violations. You couldn't put anything but a little small blip on a yellow page, and then you had to have the disclaimer. And that is just Professor Harry Cohn, God bless him, would be turning over in his grave if he saw what was going on with advertising. But I've had fun in this retirement. I really have. And there's no such thing as being absent of having something to do. I am somewhat much of an assistant, but Susan has really put the paint in my hand, and I've enjoyed painting. And it's really fascinating, and I'm learning every day things from her, and then in my own way. You've been to the house and seen the walls covered. I can't say anything, not that I've tried, but my mother, God bless her, she said, if you can draw, you can paint. Well, I could always draw because I took courses in high school, and from that, I've enjoyed it. I've even gotten a compliment or two. But more criticisms than compliments.
No, you've gotten lots of compliments. But going back to your comment about advertising, you're right. It's almost as if anything goes these days. It's not just TV. It's not just billboards, but it's social media. It's everywhere. And hopefully the Alabama State Bar and other bars around the country are keeping tabs on that. But you're right. That is a huge change in the practice of law for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Absolutely. Well, Dad, thank you for your few minutes today. I really appreciate you spending some time chatting with me and virtual David over here over my shoulder. And thank you all for tuning in. This is another episode of NOMBERG Law Live. We come at you every Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Pacific. And Dad, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I appreciate you spending some time with us.
Next time we're going to have some of the pictures to show.
Absolutely. Have a good day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Love you all.